Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could please down below, like, comment, and subscribe. What did you think of Wake Up, Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery starring our favorite detective, directed by Rian Johnson, Benoit Blanc? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. Remember, especially for a movie like this, everything we review here will always have full spoilers. I really want to get into this movie. I want to get into absolutely everything. So that is my warning now. This does have spoilers, but I'm really excited to talk about it. Save this, leave, come back. It's on Netflix and watch it immediately. I think it's incredible. That's all I'll say for now. But what is this about? Benoit Blanc investigates a seemingly suspicious and impossible murder within a small town church in upstate New York, where a charismatic priest is found dead in a locked room. Now, the locked room detail is important because this is inspired by a lot of its namesake in terms of murder mysteries. It's very heavily inspired by The Hollow Man. Seems to be I believe that's a real thing that's in this. If that is, then yes, absolutely. But it is inspired by the idea of a locked door, closed door mystery where the murder just seems impossible. There's no way it could have been done. It had to have how. There was only one person in a locked room, no one else. How was this accomplished? And a lot of it is piecing the puzzles together, much like the other two, in order to form the whole complete picture. And in order to get my full thoughts out, I do have to tell you what my thoughts are on the first two Knives Out films. This really goes far, far back for me. And this is going to sound insane when I say this, but Scooby-Doo is one of my favorite things in the world. It just is. But as someone who loved that series, franchise, all of it growing up, the live action, both of them, really think about the core components of what's happening here. They even reference Scooby-Doo in this. There's some sort of mystery. There is someone behind something. Everyone is a suspect. They need to figure out who's doing what and why. It really is in the DNA of being a murder mystery without being murder. Sometimes there is one, sometimes there's not. Typically it's more about ghosts and leaning into that and figuring out who's doing the haunting. There's always something up. There's always something suspicious. So growing up on that, I grew up really obsessed with that kind of thing. The whole puzzle piece, eliminating suspects one by one, and then obviously that linked into Scream, which also happens to be genuinely a murder mystery if you really do think about it. It's a murder mystery slasher. And now Rian Johnson has taken his inspirations from Agatha Christie and really put that love, that care for things like Murder on the Orient Express and things like what was the other one? Death on the Nile, which I think I'm just listing the movies, but Agatha Christie novels, and really placing them with a certain care and love for that detective genre. Let's piece things together, let's figure everything out, lay everything out, and everyone is a suspect. And with the first one, I loved it. I loved it so much. I thought that was a 5-star movie. I thought it was incredible. Genuinely found it inspirational when I saw it. Rian Johnson has been known for his subversion and known for flipping narratives on their heads in terms of how something operates and how you think something is going to go. That one in particular, I remember the whole idea was kind of halfway through, this is who murdered the person, but it's a lot of the mechanics of the behind the everything. Why did this happen? How did we get to this event, to this point? And I thought that was just so brilliant. There was like a lot of orchestration behind the why. There's so much that goes into these movies about not just who murdered who, but the why. The why ends up being so important. There's the whole grand stage thing, which again reminds me so much of Scooby-Doo with the mystery gang, where they're all up there and this is everything happening, all the groundwork being laid out. Here it's very much like Benoit Blanc. He even has a monologue where he says this, where he's like, oh, where I take up the stage, it's going to be fun. This is going to be amazing. And I think that here, with this as well. Now, Glass Onion, I also love a lot. I don't know, I'm kind of curious as to why that one has more mixed reactions to it. It seems to be more on the side of comedy than this one is. And the first one, they're very, very sharply funny. They always are. But that one seems to be leaning a bit more into that and really wants to make fun of that like 1% upper elite sort of. I remember it being kind of a riff off of Elon Musk. And it has one of the coolest twists I've seen in a while in the middle of the movie with Janelle Monáe. But I adored that one too. I also gave that one 5 stars. But here again, somehow, some way, with this movie, did I love it, did I hate it, or am I somewhere between on it? I fully believe that Rian Johnson has completely toppled the first two. And this is, I've seen this movie 3 times now, so I feel confident in saying this. This is the best one. It has a lot on its mind. It's by far the most serious, and yet it's still hilarious. And has really, really enigmatic and charismatic performances, particularly from Josh O'Connor. With this movie, the reason why I adored it so much is because when it first opens, there's this whole, in order to get you to fully understand what's currently happening in the present moment, I have to take you back. It's one of those things, but yet it still works. It's not one of those, oh, you're probably wondering how I got in this situation. It's nothing like that. It's more like telling the narrative to catch you up to speed, but then leaving one crucial detail out, which I thought was a brilliant choice to Daniel Craig. And honestly, the first half hour, the whole hook here, before, could even be longer than half an hour, I'm not even really sure, but before Daniel Craig is ever introduced, leading up to the actual murder itself of Josh Brolin, is just a lot of really well executed character work and a lot of really well executed back and forth. So by the time he even shows up, you're already so invested in the going ons of this church and everything that's happening in this church that you're kind of like, well, where is this even going to go from here? Because initially when it first is set up, Josh O'Connor is a former boxer that's found a new life as a priest. And his whole thing is about leaving violence behind, coming for the sake of grace, and this idea that you can forgive and you can move on, and the whole idea of grace initially in the first place. While Josh Brolin's character is really just like the bare bone, like bare knuckled kind of really angry, really violent sort of, the whole idea of the Catholicism where it's more like the anger of some of the feelings that come out of that, the guilt that comes out of, like, the Catholic guilt thing that we hear so often. And he really indicts his flock with the feeling of guilt and of anger and inflicts that back onto them, where he's like, he is sort of corralling them into radicalizing them. That's a big part of this, that no matter what he does, no matter what he says or anything, they will follow him. They believe in him because he's cultivated that atmosphere. He's really narrowed it down. Any single time one of the new people shows up in his church, he kind of isolates the people that are already there, and he has a small group. And that really, really isolates the whole character work of how they all feel. And honestly, let's go ahead and extend into the positives overall. First things first, I still want to go back into the performances. Josh O'Connor is just masterfully acted in this in terms of his character. He is very much down to the ground in terms of how he interacts with people. And there seems to be sometimes a real boiling energy underneath him that he really wants to try and push back down. And you get so much out of this between small glimpses, between camera lingering on his either his fist or this wince that he does with his eyes, or this little smirk he does where it differentiates. Sometimes he's actually genuinely happy by something, but that sometimes he's actually really frustrated and he's kind of astounded at what some of the things that Josh Brolin is saying to him. And I think that that's a really tricky character to pull off because he is angsty. He is very much a religious feeling figure that he puts those beliefs onto others, but it's not harping. It's not like projecting onto other people. And I think that's what Daniel Craig assumes is going to happen when he first shows up with Benoit Blanc's character, but then it just never does because Josh O'Connor's character is just not that. He's not like that. He's very much in the acceptance form. He wants to guide people even if they feel like they don't either believe or need that guidance. And I love the patience that his character practices, but also himself as that character. It's really astounding, and there's a lot of layers to this that I feel are really hard to pull off for something of this magnitude. So by the time that, of course, Benoit Blanc shows up, an absolutely phenomenal character, you almost kind of forget that he's even there. I don't even know how much time passes before he shows up, but then he's like, give me a sign. And then, of course, it's brilliant. There's this opening shot of Daniel Craig where he first walks in, and you can see his silhouette up against the the cross that's missing, but you still see the silhouette like outlining him. It's so well done, and I think that there is. I'm going to get into some of these shadows here, but still focusing on the performances. This is an ensemble cast, and I do think that the main leads, being Josh O'Connor and Daniel Craig, are so astounding. They have so much chemistry with each other, and I think that the more and more we learn little morsels of Daniel Craig's character, it's really fascinating. In this one, he seems kind of not disturbed by the idea of where he is, but he shows up already kind of not arrogant, but like something has been on his mind, something's been bothering him. And I don't know if they're going to get into that with a fourth one. I'm not saying that they're even sequel building or anything. I think that he just shows up, and he seemed like already like something else was on his mind. There was a whole thing where Josh O'Connor brings up one of his cases, and he's like, wait, you were on The View, and he seems almost annoyed that he brought it up. So I just find it really interesting. There's a lot of small stuff to gauge out of what his character is currently going through. He's got longer hair, it's flowy, it's all over the place, he's unshaven, and there's a lot of small character work like that tells you kind of something has been going on outside of this with him. We just don't know what it is, because in the second one it was summery, of course, and this one has much more of like a fall feel, but that one he seemed clean shaven, he seemed clean cut, he had these like summer suits and all that, and he seemed very well tailored. Here he still does, but now something just kind of seems off about his character in a good way, not like the actor's board. He seems, this is very intentional in terms of performance, is what I think. And he obviously gets very caught up in the case and everything, and that's the whole passion of his, that he's like, I like the kind of cockiness thing he has with Mila Kunis too, where he's like, no case of mine is unsolvable. And I just found all of that really fascinating in terms of him. Obviously, a lot of the supporting players are very important. And since we can spoil this, just forewarning again, we've already gone into some of them. But obviously, the low-key standout performance up until she gets her big, grand monologue is Glenn Close as the person who did it, who was responsible. And I really like that particular character, Martha, because when she first shows up, it's very much like that one personality of like, oh, very very by the book, very sticklery, very like I'm a woman of God and everything is like by the numbers. But then the more and more things go on, obviously she's able to play that kind of, she's not even a villain necessarily, she is the antagonist, but there ends up being so much more underneath the layers of her in terms of her big monologue where she gives her confession and goes back, and she was holding this image that she still felt guilty of for years, where she was saying, I've always been the innocent one, I've always upheld this image that I am the innocent one. And honestly, I really like that the whole theme of this seems to be, grace, and then the name of her sister is Grace. So by the time it gets to the end, she's like, that poor girl, and then she says Grace, but it seems to be kind of double meaning in terms of what it's saying, where it's like give grace or give grace to something. And I really liked that connection overall, because there are a lot of themes of more than ever. I disagree when people say that the first two weren't about anything. I fully disagree. The first one very much seems to be about, from my memory, it was like privilege and about that whole social status norm thing. But the second one was also very much a send up of the upper class, like the elite. And this one obviously has the most on its mind in terms of genuine theming, I think, because it very much is about people that have placed faith in someone that they believe that they could believe in, and then by the time he leaves, it turns out that like he was just radicalizing them for his own belief system. But then Josh O'Connor, the leading man, has a crisis of faith of a sort. He even at a point has a monologue where he fully believes in Benoit Blanc, and he says, I can't believe I put my faith in you. And obviously that's supposed to be a parallel to his genuine practicing faith, but he never breaks that. He very much feels lost, because he's like, this isn't what I became a priest to be doing. I became a priest for so much more than this, for so much more than just the whodunit game. And you feel that. You feel a lot of sense of urgency here through the characters in terms of their motivations and their why. Josh O'Connor is the main character here. Benoit Blanc is essentially, like all three, pretty much a supporting lead, but he's also in it. When he shows up, he does not really ever not in a scene. He's in a couple without Daniel Craig, but still. But it very much seems to be that this one has the idea that he's sent somewhere, and this is a priest going through his full crisis of faith and still learning that he does want to be doing this, and ends up learning that he has so much to give in terms of what he does. I think that this movie does a really interesting thing when it comes to the practice of religion and Catholicism, because there's an early monologue with Daniel Craig where obviously he's very much, in terms of detective, he even says that he's a proud heretic, but then they bounce their ideals back and forth where he's like, I think that this is a myth constructed for this reason. And then Josh O'Connor's rebuttal is basically, it is a constructed myth, but at the end of the day, is it a constructed myth that is true, that we do relish in all of these things because we do find ourselves to believe in these things as true? And the whole thing about comparing the 19th neo-century Gothic to Disneyland, I just think that's a really smart line, because it's a matter of detail. It's a matter of, you're not wrong, but also there is a belief system here that this is based off of that I find to be true. And Daniel Craig never necessarily changes, or Benoit Blanc never necessarily changes his opinion throughout, but he comes to understand where Josh O'Connor comes from. I think he ends up developing a liking for practically all three of the main leads in all of them, and you can sense that here as well. They've got dynamite back and forth with each other. This feels very much the most like Holmes and Watson out of all three of them, in my personal opinion. And I end up loving the interactions and the back and forth here. I think that the whole supporting cast, Glenn Close is obviously doing phenomenal work. Josh Brolin is really playing it up as this very much like new age kind of pastor with a knowledge that he's getting views on YouTube for really strong belief system. He was all about the game like that before he even was going on air like that, because he said that his whole thing was to provoke, that everyone there knew that they were like, this is not the church, this is not really church, but they still believe in him to an extent. And I won't disagree that outside of the main, I think 4 of them, that this is kind of the cast with the least to do, but I think it's because, I'm not even going to count that as a negative, because of the main focus on the leads being so focused in terms of how they are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, especially Josh O'Connor, that I had really no issue with that. And I could not for the life of me figure out how on earth the murder was even done until they fully lay it out and explain it. But by the time they get to it, you're like, that's brilliant. That's so smart. You'll catch, in my personal opinion, you'll get one of the killers while you're watching it, but not both of them, because there's technically 2 people complicit in it. They went the Scream route. And I mean, I got no issue with that, but it's very much, the one person that comes up with it. But then you don't really know the whole back and forth. You're like, well, something's got to be going on that's not just this, but also this. And that turns out to be what it is. But then, of course, like every Rian Johnson Knives Out film, there is always an extra twist in there. And this one had to do with the flask in the closed room, which I thought was a brilliant detail, because then they focus on that and you end up being like, how does all of this stack up? I love that they show Benoit Blanc's thought process, and every time, I mean, some of these movies have a similar rhythm, but this one felt so much different in the sense that maybe it was the most straightforward of a mystery, because the first 2 had so much idea of subversion that this one felt like, okay, if we get caught up in that, then we can't really quite do the character work, which this one feels the most focused on doing, because it is the most dramatic. It does have the most to say in terms of really kind of not picking apart in a bad way, but really analyzing and picking apart these characters and what makes them tick and why. And this movie does one really smart moment. It's another positive for me. This one's really well written, is what I will say. Like, I think that the topical humor is always well done. I thought the whole rant about politics with the up-and-coming political person, Psy, was really funny, that he tries to play both sides, but just none of it will stick. And that monologue's hilarious. But it really leans into this moment where it halts the movie on purpose. Like it is very much in the rhythm of things, but then Josh O'Connor stops, just like everything stops for this character to pray for someone. And it's one of the best scenes of the year in a movie. It's a very, very intimate. It's pretty much just done on a phone. And the way the character breaks, her name's Louise, and it changes from this like humorous phone call for these character customer service interactions, and just stops and says, "Could you please pray for me? I'm having a tough time," and then gives this reason why, what she has going on in her life, and it just proves the power of a character's belief system like that, what they can do for people and what these people fully believe in. And I thought that was so brilliant. It brings the movie to a stop on purpose and ends up being the central core theme of it, and it's so well done, and ends up being that it's not about this whole, like, we know that the way that they portray the YouTube thing with the whole sort of panicky rage bait thing that people do on YouTube. Also, Andrew Scott's character was very much one of those like isolated, out in the woods, very conspiracy theorist person that that type of internet personality I'm talking about, if you know what I'm talking about. And he very much is an analysis on that, and that's also well done. But I really loved a lot of the character motifs here and the types and what they really leaned into. And then it's funny that I got so caught up in the story stuff here, but I really want to talk about the way this is shot for a second. I believe by Steven Yedlin. Am I getting the name on that right? The cinematographer of this that he works with often for, it was like Last Jedi and honestly really all of their stuff together. I know that they've done, but always brilliant work. And this one has a very specific look to it. I think it actually has the most intentional look in what it's going for. It's very, very fall feeling. And there's one moment in this that feels so... It actually happens a couple times, but it's so intentional. There's this road to Damascus thing that they've been building up to throughout the movie, but you don't notice it. But you do notice it in theaters, believe it or not. If only they would release it for longer than 2 weeks in a theater. Where sometimes the light will go away in a scene and then will come back, and they're using natural lighting, and you're like, that's such an interesting detail to use. I wonder why. And then it's actually for a payoff. It's for the end where Benoit Blanc is about to go through his, big grand explanation, and then he has a road to Damascus moment, and he looks up into the sky, and it's the lights shining into his eyes, and it's just so brilliantly done that it's jaw-dropping pretty much, because you know exactly the thought process, you know what's clicking in his brain, because you do see Benoit Blanc's gears turning pretty much constantly throughout every movie that he's in. And there's a lot of other really intentional moments that are just usage of color that I thought were brilliant. When there's the first initial flashback with Grace, the background being red with this huge like red black circle in the middle, and then the actual flashback from the real memory where it's like a blue backdrop, was so well done to tell both versions of both stories, because you can see the undercurrent of red from that flashback even whenever it's the pastor, I'm blanking on the name here, but the pastor of the past, and then cuts to the actual flashback, and then it switches to blue, and to show the difference between the emotions being felt there, that they keep saying poor girl about her, and then you see the actual flashback with the blue, and you can associate that with sadness, of course. And then there's also this repeating thing of, we talked about the lights as well, and I just thought that all of that was so brilliant, and also utilizing the political activist YouTuber to keep recording everything was a very smart storytelling device. That way, if he's recording everything, that means that he has the footage. I just thought that was really smart storytelling mechanic. And honestly, I thought this movie was so great. I loved it. And I really liked the sense of urgency with the music that's in it. It feels very, very energetic and propulsive. And this movie's like 2 hours and 2.5 hours. So you think you'd feel that runtime, but you never do. But I thought that this movie was just an astonishing piece of work that really does analyze why a character would fully need to have faith in something, and what can that do for people, and what can that do for other people. That it means a lot for people to have faith in something, for people to believe that not just that miracles could happen, but that genuinely that there is something out there to support you, to root for you, to be with you, for you to believe. And I really, really loved that as the crux here in terms of what Josh O'Connor's character believes as well, Pastor Father Judd. And overall, I thought that this movie was so brilliant, so smart, so cleverly written. I thought that this was just incredible. And yeah, overall, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. Somehow, some way, this is the best of the three. I loved this one. And that, keep that in mind, that's me saying that as someone who gave the other two 5 stars. So they're on a perfect winning streak with me here. But I also love murder mysteries a lot. It's really easy to get me with those. But still, I loved this so much. Benoit Blanc can keep on showing up for like 10 to 15 more of these. I don't mind if one of these comes out every couple of years. I loved this one so much. What did you guys think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. Up next is Avatar, Fire and Ash. I'm very excited about that. I loved Way of Water. I liked the first one, but I loved Way of Water. And The Housemaid, which looks surprisingly very good to me. I have hopes for that one. But again, stay tuned for that, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you listen to this or watch this and you haven't seen Wake Up Dead Man, I don't know why you did that, but watch that right now immediately if you can. Also, some theaters are still showing it. I highly recommend you see it that way. Again, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.